Many people don't stop praying because they stop believing in something larger than themselves. They stop praying because prayer gradually becomes uncomfortable, confusing, or quietly disappointing, and over time it begins to feel like an activity that demands something from them rather than a relationship that can hold them. For some, prayer starts to feel tense, as though there are indivisible rules about what can be said and what should be avoided, which emotions are acceptable, and which ones signal a lack of faith. For others, prayer feels exhausting because it seems to require the right words, the right tone, or the right emotional state in order to work. And when prayer feels like that, people often assume the problem is internal, that something about them is insufficient, distracted, or perhaps even broken. But very often, the problem is not faith itself. The problem is the way prayer has been framed. For many people, prayer was learned explicitly or implicitly as a form of performance. It was something you did correctly or incorrectly, something that could succeed or fail, something that required discipline, reverence, certainty, or emotional control. Even when those expectations were never spoken out loud, the body learned them anyway, and the body is very good at remembering what it needs to brace for. A braced body does not experience relationship, it manages interaction. And when prayer is experienced as an interaction that must be managed, it loses its ability to feel nourishing, grounding, or stabilizing. Over time, people either force themselves to continue praying out of obligation, or they quietly stop, not because they no longer care, but because the practice no longer feels safe or meaningful. What changes this is a simple but profound reorientation, understanding prayer not primarily as speech, but as orientation. Orientation is the direction you face when you don't know what happens next. It is the posture you return to when life is uncertain, unresolved, disappointing, or ambiguous. Orientation answers a different question than performance. Performance asks whether you did something correctly. Orientation asks where you are standing inwardly as you move through your life. This matters because life does not unfold based on how eloquently we speak to it. Life unfolds based on the patterns of attention, expectation, and response that we practice over time. When prayer is reduced to asking for outcomes, every delay can feel like rejection, every unanswered request can feel like abandonment, and every moment of uncertainty can feel personal. But when prayer becomes orientation, it creates a way to remain in relationship with life even when life does not explain itself. This does not mean abandoning hope, and it does not mean lowering expectations. It means shifting from a transactional model of prayer to a relational one, where prayer is less about controlling outcomes and more about shaping how we inhabit the space between desire and reality. It's important to say clearly what this approach to prayer is not. It is not positive thinking. It is not denial. It is not pretending that everything is fine when it's not. It is not spiritual bypassing, and it is not a demand that you feel calm, grateful, or optimistic before you're ready. Prayer's orientation begins with honesty, not optimism. It begins by acknowledging where you actually are than where you think you should be. This kind of honesty does not require dramatic language or spiritual framing. It can be as simple as admitting confusion, fear, fatigue, anger, disappointment, or grief. It does not attempt to correct these states or elevate them into something more acceptable. It simply names them. This first movement can be thought of as honest contact with reality. And honest contact is deeply regulating because it tells the nervous system something essential, that you do not have to hide parts of yourself in order to remain in relationship. Many people underestimate how powerful this is. When honesty is allowed, the body begins to soften, not because circumstances have changed, but because self abandonment has stopped. After honest contact comes a second movement, which is where orientation truly takes shape. This is not about fixing your emotions or taking yourself out of how you feel. It is about choosing from within reality the direction you'll face. This might sound like acknowledging fear while remaining open to support, admitting uncertainty while staying receptive to guidance, or recognizing the desire for control while releasing what is not actually yours to carry. These are not affirmations meant to override experience. They are relational postures that allow experience to exist without becoming the only center of gravity. In this way, prayer becomes less about changing circumstances and more about shaping how attention is trained. Attention is the steering mechanism of the inner life. What you can consistently attend to shapes what you notice, how you interpret events, what meaning you assign, and what choices you make over time. And attention is always being trained, whether consciously or not, by fear, urgency, comparison, past conditioning, and constant stimulation. Prayer as orientation is the intentional practice of allowing something deeper than fear or urgency to train your attention. It is not a single moment of focus, but a repeated return to a chosen posture of relationship, presence, and openness. This is why prayer, understood this way, is not magic. It is formation. It forms how you meet reality, how you respond to uncertainty, and how you remain connected to yourself and to life even when outcomes are unclear. This understanding becomes even more meaningful when we consider the role of the nervous system. Belief is not only an idea held in the mind, it is an expectancy carried in the body. If your system has learned to anticipate disappointment, it will rehearse disappointment. If it has learned to anticipate abandonment, it will scan for signs of it. These patterns are not failures of faith, they are protective adaptations. Prayer as orientation gently retrains expectancy, not by forcing different outcomes, but by practicing a different way of remaining present. Over time, the nervous system begins to learn that uncertainty does not automatically signal danger, that waiting does not equal abandonment, and that presence is possible even without resolution. The practice here is not perfection, it is return. Minds drift, emotions surge, bodies brace, and doubts arise. None of this indicates failure. The practice is noticing and returning again and again to a posture of relationship rather than isolation. Each return reinforces a new pattern. It teaches the nervous system that it can come back, that it does not disappear when answers are delayed, and that it does not need to collapse in order to be honest. Over time, this changes what you notice in daily life. You may notice options sooner, recognize support more easily, or sense when something is no longer yours to carry. Sometimes the answer to prayer is not a dramatic shift in circumstances. Sometimes it is a quiet change in posture. It is becoming someone who can hold disappointment without collapsing, who can act without panic, who can wait without self abandonment, and who can love without bargaining. This kind of change is subtle, but it is profound because it reshapes how life is experienced from the inside out. Prayer, understood as orientation, becomes something you live rather than something you perform. It becomes available in ordinary moments, in unresolved seasons, and in the quiet spaces where nothing spectacular happens. And because it does not require you to be someone else, it does not burn you out. It simply invites you to stay. If you'd like a deeper, perhaps even more complete exploration of this framework, how prayer becomes orientation, how attention shapes experience, how identity shifts through repeated return, and how to pray in moments of doubt, delay, or disappointment, I explore all that in my book, Pray Like Someone Is Listening: How Prayer as Orientation Changes What You Notice, Who You Become, and What Life Can Give.